Welcome to the Hang 3 written test review. I'm Takeo Eda. I'm a basic instructor that lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. In addition to being a basic instructor, I spent the last 4 years as an observer / mentor. I'm also a private pilot, so that feeds into a lot of what we're going to be doing today. So let's just go ahead and get straight into it. Okay, so our agenda is we're gonna go over aerodynamics, weather and atmospheric conditions. We'll talk about flying technique, safety, rules of the road, and we'll go over sectional charts in airspace. Aerodynamics. Okay, the wing. So the definition of aerodynamic chord is the imaginary line from the leading edge of the wing to the trailing edge of the wing, right? So you have this picture of an airfoil, right? The point at the very rearmost port of that airfoil is the trailing edge. The frontmost port is the leading edge. The aerodynamic chord is the imaginary line that goes from point A to point B. Okay. Okay. So what is angle of attack? Angle of attack is the difference between the chord line and the relative wind, right? So the chord line again is the imaginary line between the leading edge of the wing and the trailing edge of the wing. The relative wind is the direction the airflow is approaching that wing, and that angle that the wing meets the air is called the angle of attack. Okay. Going on to defining terms, we'll do wing loading. So what is wing loading? Wing loading is the total weight carried by the aircraft divided by the wing area, right? So for example, if you're flying a Falcon 170 and your hooking's 200 pounds, then you'll take the wing area 170 divided by 200 pounds. That gives you your wing loading. Okay. Okay. So what is a stall? Can anybody describe what a stall actually is for me? In your own words.
Loss of control.
That is an effect that can be an effective stall, yes. But okay. See if you can give it another try.
When there's well, we have the definition here, but when there's not enough forces at work for you to maintain control.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Angle of attack gets too big to the relative to the relative wind.
Right. So stall is when you exceed the critical angle of attack. Your airfoil exceeds the critical angle of attack, which results in a loss of lift. Okay. Now, to Richard's point, you can lose control. Let's say you've got a wing and you're in a stall and you move the ailerons or you weight shift and the sail shifts from one side to the other and it changes the angle of attack on one wing, and one wing stalls and the other one keeps flying. What do we call that? A spin. Right?
It's called ground looping into the hill because of the wind gradient. Over.
that can happen too, right? So what'll happen is one wing will be in a slower air than the other wing, and then basically the lift difference between each wing panel will cause the glider or the airplane to turn around back towards the hill, right? So yeah. So stall, the simple definition of a stall is that you exceed the critical angle of attack. Okay. Okay, so a stall can occur at any speed, and how close you are to a stall depends on, given a certain level of flight airspeed, depends on the load factor of the wing. So everybody talks about stall speed, right? But can you stall a wing quickly, like when you're flying fast?
Yes.
Yeah, you can, right? So if you're going to use the hang glider example, basically you're pulled in, and when you could blow up your glider doing this, but if you went immediate to a full flare, you could effectively stall the wing, right? You would just exceed the critical angle of attack, right? And airplanes would call that an accelerated stall. Now, if you're flying around and you're in level flight, that's 1G, right? So the wing is experiencing 1G. Now, what happens when you turn? You bank the wing and you turn. What happens to the load factor on that wing? Does it go up or down?
Goes up.
It goes up, right? Which means you're flying closer or farther away from your critical angle of attack. Assume like a level, steady state turn.
Be closer.
Yeah, you'd be closer to the critical angle of attack because you're taking some of the lift that would keep you in the air and you're using part of it to turn, right? So in order to stay in the air, right, the wing needs to generate more lift to compensate for the loss of part of that lift that you're using to turn. So you have what's called the lift vector. It's the imaginary line that comes out of the top of the wing. When you tilt it, it means that wing has to generate more lift in order to keep your aircraft in the air, right? Because you're using part of that lift to turn. That's important later. Okay, the wing, washout. So washout is a gradual twist built into the wing to decrease the angle of attack from root to tip. It has the effect of delaying stall on parts of the wing, and it helps maintain roll control angles of attack and tame stall characteristics. So to your point, Richard, you talked about losing control. So if I have a wing and I raise the angle of attack, and let's say the outer parts of the wing stall first, right? What's a potential result of that? You could drop a wing, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Now, if I move the aileron, if I move ailerons and I change the angle of attack of the wing in order to give me roll control, if I'm already close to the critical angle of attack and I lower that aileron, that wing will stall first. Right. Now you have washout, so the gradual changing of the or decreasing the angle of attack from root to the tips. What happens is that when the wing, you pitch the wing up, the root, the center part of the wing stalls first, and the tips stay flying. Okay. Now in hang gliders, what happens is because the tips are farther back from the center of gravity and the tips are still flying, the root starts to stall. The tips keep lifting and it pushes the nose down. Okay. All right. Tame stall characteristics. So put it another way, an airplane with bad stall characteristics, if you stall it, one wing will stall before the other and the airplane will flip upside down. A lot of World War II fighters were notorious for that behavior. Hang gliders, you generally don't run into that. Okay. So washout, gradual twist from the wing, built into the wing to decrease the angle of attack from root to the tip. Okay. All right, we talked about load factor. How much lift the wing has to generate in order to maintain level flight. It's higher in turns because part of the lift is used to turn. The increased angle of attack in the turn will increase the apparent speed at which the glider will stall. And because of the turn, the G loading increases, which increases the wing loading, right? So when you have the amount of weight that the wing is lifting, if that goes up all of a sudden, that means the speed at which your glider will stall will go up, right? Because you're already flying at a high angle of attack. Okay, adverse yaw. So whenever you create lift, you create drag. So the drag generated by the lifting force on one tip will cause the aircraft to yaw opposite direction of the roll. It will delay the turn and is more pronounced in high performance gliders. So a good example is let's say, for instance, I want to roll this way. When I want roll to the right, I'll lower the aileron or shift my weight on the glider so that this part of the wing, the left wing, will get flatter, and the right wing will billow more, right? And what that does is it increases the angle of attack on this wing. When you generate lift on one wing, you generate drag, so it's going to want to drag the nose the opposite direction. So you'll get this, right? In airplanes, you have a rudder. So what you can do is you can actually use the rudder to force the nose to come around even though that wing is up. In hang gliders, what will happen is for a brief amount of time, the nose will go the other way. So if you ever watch like somebody flying at like a topless glider or high performance glider, when they quickly roll from one direction to the other, you actually notice the nose will go the other way for just a brief moment. Okay, so that's what's called adverse yaw because it's bad, right? Adverse. It works opposite the direction you actually want to turn, right? Now it's more pronounced on high performance gliders. So you have what we call a larger aspect ratio. So the wing is thinner and longer. When that wing is shaped that way, the adverse yaw is worse. So on a Falcon, Falcon wings are typically short and fat, right? Or like an Alpha. An Alpha's shaped like this, right? So what'll happen is that on wings that are long and thin, you'll get more adverse yaw. On wings that are short and fat, you'll get less adverse yaw. Make sense? Okay. Skip, what's glide ratio? Without looking at the slide, please. Define
For
it in your
sure.
own words.
That's the ratio of the, or it's the glider's distance it covers over the ground,
Given,
given a certain elevation.
so you have a certain amount of height, gets you a certain amount of distance over the ground, right?
Right.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly right. Right. So if on a typical Falcon, you get like a 7-to-1 glide ratio, right? So if I lift you 1 foot in the air, you'll go 7 feet forward, right? If I lift you 10 feet in the air, you'll go 70 feet forward, right? If I lift you 1 mile in the air, you go 7 miles down, right? That's the glide ratio.
And Takeo, just to jump in real quick, that
Mhm.
actually really confused me on the test because I
Mhm.
was thinking about the ratio as a fraction,
Mhm.
and that is not an effective way to think about it for the test.
Yeah, it's literally a ratio, right?
Yep.
It's not. It's. I mean, it in real terms, it is a fraction, but yeah.
Right. When they say greater though on the test, it's not in terms of as a fraction, right? Because like 1/64 would be a smaller fraction.
Right.
than,
Right.
right?
I
Oh,
see what
yeah.
you're saying.
That's
Yeah.
right. So that got me on the test. Just FYI.
Yeah. So the way to explain that would be less altitude loss for a given forward distance, right? So, yeah. Okay. Best glide at best L over D. All right. So, I just told you that lift whenever you generate lift, you generate drag, right? That's what's called induced drag, right? When you have drag of stuff like hang out in the wind, like a wire or your harness, right? That's what's called parasitic drag or interference drag or form drag, right? So what happens is induced drag, when you're flying slow because the angle of attack of the wing is high, you fly, you're generating a lot of drag for the amount of lift that you make. The faster you go, the less angle of attack you need, so your induced drag gets lower, right? But drag, in terms of, let's say I throw a baseball through the air, okay? It's the square of the speed. So what happens is if I take a baseball and I throw it at 30 miles an hour, I get, let's say, unit 1, right? But when I throw it at twice the speed, it's unit 4, right? So there's a point at which the amount of drag that you get from induced drag is the lowest, and also it's the lowest in terms of the other types of drag as well. So where those two lines cross, that's what you call best L over D or best glide. Okay. So yeah, form drag, induced drag. That's what the diagram is showing you. Okay. Again, we're still sort of defining terms. All right. Drag, induced drag,
Mikhail,
created by
in the book, they mentioned profile drag. Which one is that?
Yeah, so profile drag is form drag. So sorry.
Form drag.
I don't have that in the slide. So basically, like, yeah, anything else, like, it's driven by shape. How about like what your surface is, like whether you got two surfaces that meet another, right? But that's all other types of drag apart from induced drag. And I think, yeah, this is actually a really good diagram. So what happens is you got a wing that's flying at a positive angle of attack, right? Well, the lift is generated at right angles, perpendicular to the airfoil, right? And so a small percentage of that lift also creates a backward force equal drag. Make sense? Also at high angles of attack, you guys know what I mean by wake turbulence?
Mhm.
No? Okay, so what happens is that when an aircraft flies, any aircraft that generates lift flies through the air, it creates a region of disturbed air, right? And what'll happen is on most aircraft with relatively short wings or even long wings, what'll happen is there's high pressure on the bottom of the wing and low pressure on the top of the wing. When they meet at the tip, what does it create? Anybody want to take a guess?
Those spinning, yeah.
Yeah, causes wingtip vortices, right? So that wingtip vortice is you're using energy. The airplane is, or the aircraft is using energy to make those vortices, right? It's wasted energy, right? It's wingtip vortices or drag. Yeah. So if you ever see a airliner where you got a wingtip device where the tip of the wing is tilted up like this, right? That's to interrupt the wingtip vortice. Right. So best drag or best glide is lowest induced drag, lowest form, and other types of drag. Right. That where those two meet, that's best glide. Oh, we need to get into ground effect. So we just talked about tip vortices. So you're flying a wing through the air, right? There's a pressure differential between above the wing and below the wing. That's what keeps you in the air, right? When it reaches the tip, these two pressures want to equalize. So the high pressure wants to go up, and it goes around the low pressure region at the wing tip. So you get a wingtip vortice, right? Now, if I take this wing and I put it up against another surface, right, i.e. the ground, if I get low enough, then the ground interferes with the production of that wingtip vortice, right? So effectively, what it does is it makes the wing more efficient, right? So ground effect does what to your flight? Have
Will it
any of you come into the
improve your
ground?
glide? Is that what you're?
Yeah. So that's what happens. So what happens is like if you come in and you have speed and you get down into ground effect, right? All of a sudden your glider flies much better because now all of a sudden those wingtip vortices are not stealing energy from your wing. Does that make sense? That's the easiest way to explain it, I can think. Right? It makes your wing more efficient. All right. Wind gradient, wind shear. So the difference of wind speed of direction and altitude. Wind at altitude can be significantly stronger or different direction versus ground level. And generally overcast stable days have more wind gradient. All right. Thermals are more prevalent over high dry ground, and extra speed when close to terrain is advised. All right. So have any of you experienced wind shear or wind gradient?
No.
Okay. So Mia, I see how you fly because you guys are taught to pull in, right?
Mhm.
Now, have you ever seen it where somebody's coming in and they're basically floating in? They're not pulling in at all extra.
Yeah.
Okay. What happens when they get to a certain altitude?
I mean, they just kind of come in and then they just.
Yeah, they kind of drop onto the ground, right? Because what happens is that the wind gets stronger as you go up in altitude, and as you're coming down through the wind gradient, what's happening to your airspeed if you don't change anything?
It's going down.
Right, because the wind is slowing down, right? So every time you go through until what'll happen is as you're coming down through the wind gradient and you're leaving the glider essentially trim, it wants to seek its trimmed airspeed, right? So every time it comes down through each slowing bit of air, the glider will pitch down to get the extra airspeed that it's missing from that slower wind. Does that make sense? So what'll happen is you'll see like they'll come in, they'll be floating in, the glider will go like this and then go like that, or like that. Now, at some point, the glider is not going to have enough airspeed to continue flying, right? And at that point, if you're 10, 15 feet above the ground, the glider is just going to drop you on the ground, right? Now, there's going to be days where now the wind gradient typically is more pronounced the stronger the wind is, right? So if you're like approaching on a windy day, you'll see like you'll be hardly moving when you're at altitude and you'll start to speed up as you get closer to the ground. Well, if you don't have any of the extra airspeed, bad things will happen. Okay. So that's why you're taught to pull in and get extra speed on the approach, right? You'll see, and unfortunately, experienced pilots are the worst at this, where especially if they're used to flying in smooth conditions, and they'll barely be pulling in and they'll just float all the way to the ground, and they'll get away with it if it's nice and smooth, right? but then occasionally you'll come in and there'll be a lot of wind gradient or there's thermal activity or whatever, and they'll get to a certain altitude and the glider will just drop them on the ground. Right. And Mia knows this because a lot of our compatriots in Japan, they love to float in, and quite a few of them get dropped on the ground. Okay. All right. Any questions? No? Okay. All right.
Just to build on top of that, it's a safety thing also. If you fly slow through the wind gradient, you may end up inadvertently flying below your best maneuvering speed. And if there's any mechanical turbulence or anything else going on in the landing zone, you give up your ability to quickly maneuver the glider. So that speed is important for many different reasons.
Yep. Just think of it as every layer that you go through in the wind gradient, it's going to steal a little bit of energy from you. And if you don't have that energy to begin with, it's bad things will happen. And the thing is the interesting part is most gliders, some gliders, their maneuvering, their minimum controlled airspeed is, let's see here. Their minimum controlled airspeed is sometimes below their stall. But most gliders, their minimum controlled airspeed is above their stall, especially like intermediate double surface gliders like Sport 2s and 3s. Like you can find yourself in a position where the glider you'll lose control of it before the glider stalls, right? So that's what Clark is talking about. Okay, thunderstorms and convective activity. Stay away. 30 miles is a practical maximum or minimum. Reasons of powerful sink, lift, and gust fronts. Some pilots will try and fly them. Don't follow them. Rain, hail, and virga are all convective activity. So the Bay Area is a perfect example. We had a rainstorm that just came through. We had 20 to 30 mile an hour winds with gusts up to 40. And the lapse rate was incredible, right? So you look at it and go, oh, hey, that might be a good flight, but then you realize, like, as the front comes through, you're gonna, if you're in the air, you're really gonna be hating life. You'll be wanting to be on the ground. Okay. All right. Density altitude. Technical definition is the pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. The higher your density altitude, the worse the performance of your glider. Humidity, hot temperatures all have a negative effect on density altitude. Now, so for instance, let's say you're approaching your landing zone. It's a really nice, I mean, it's a hot day. Okay. In terms of density altitude, what is that going to do to your glider performance? Like, what is that going to do to you? How are you going to feel as you're making your approach to your landing? Is the glider response going to be any faster? It'll be better. Will it be better or worse?
You're gonna have a higher ground speed.
Right. Right. So for a given amount of bar pressure, apparent bar pressure, you'll have more ground speed, right? So how about like your turn radius? How's your turn radius going to be at a higher density altitude? Will it be wider or smaller? Nobody? So yeah, your glider's responsiveness will be lower, your turn radius will be wider, your ground speed will be faster. Your launches will have to be stronger. Okay, density, high density altitude. Okay, clouds. I'm not going to talk about all the clouds because that's easy enough to look up. But the ones to worry about are lenticular clouds. Why we call them lenticular clouds?
They look like lens.
Yeah, shaped like a lens, right? What do they indicate? High wind speeds at altitude. Okay, typically over a mountain, right? So if you look at a mountain, and Mount Fuji commonly has lenticular clouds. We have a cone-shaped mountain, and over the top it has like a hat that's shaped like a lens. That means high wind speed, right? Okay. Cumulonimbus, high clouds that are often source of rain. Skip, you live in Arizona. I'm sure you get New Mexico, you get thunderstorms, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So cumulonimbus, nimbus equal rain, right? Rain equal convective activity, stay away. Winds, evenings. So you're standing in a typical landing zone near a mountain site. As the sun starts to go down and after it goes down, what can happen to the winds in that area?
They can shift to be katabatic.
Yeah, exactly. They go the opposite direction. All right, so we'll go briefly over flying technique. It's important to get prone only after clearing the hill and stabilizing a flight. A lot of you people see experienced pilots who are constantly rushing into getting into the prone position on launch. Now, if you've got the skill to pull it off, you got the skill to pull it off. But there are times where you'll want to make sure that you are clear of the mountain before you worry about getting prone. Right, your first goal is to get to a safe location. Approaches. If wing grading is suspected, the approach with extra airspeed to account for wind speed loss as you get close to the ground, like we were talking about, is advised. Set up an approach to a small field with 20-mile-per-hour wind with no trees or obstacles. The safest approach is a figure 8. Okay, so everybody talks about downwind base final, downwind base final. But if you're approaching a small field and you don't know like what the conditions are on the ground there, you can do figure 8 in the back of the landing zone until you get to the altitude where you're ready to make your approach. Okay. Launches. To have a smooth, safe takeoff on a moderate slope, you must achieve sufficient airspeed at a proper angle of attack. If you're launching in light winds from steep slopes, you'll need to hold the nose slightly lower relative to the horizon. Launching at high altitude, hot, humid site, your takeoff will need to be stronger, longer, or faster than normal. And your best launch technique for moderate to high winds on a cliff are fully assisted wire launch. Anybody done a fully assisted wire launch? Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, because you guys have some pretty strong winds at lookout there. Okay. All right. Now, let's say you're landing on a 20-degree sloping field in sub 5-mile-per-hour winds. It's normally safest to land uphill, right? Let's say, for instance, we'll take that situation and you decide, oh, I want to land into the wind downhill. What happens to your glide?
Comes very long.
Yeah, exactly. So, Richard, have you flown McClure yet?
Yes.
So you know the downhill part of McClure, right?
Yeah, you can float down that all the way down.
Right. What's
Yeah.
the typical advice for landing if you find yourself on the downhill?
Just to ride it out to the uphill.
Yep. Or
Till
yeah,
it
don't flare
turns.
is the other one I would normally tell you.
Okay.
Okay. So, but McClure also has an uphill, right? What have you had a chance to land on the uphill yet?
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression?
Much easier. And you can, by the time you get there, you're going a lot slower, so you don't have to, run as you're landing.
Yep, that's right. So landing uphill is generally safer. You can flare earlier. It's a little more tolerant, and you'll stop faster. Okay.
What do you do if it's more than 5 miles per hour?
That is a tough call. So like here at Mission, I will typically regularly land downwind uphill, even if it's up to like 10 miles an hour. Right. But like that is a kind of a high technique situation. Right. If you find yourself in a situation where you are contemplating, like y'all are threes, you're probably not going to be running in a situation where you're going to be approaching a landing zone where you've never been to before. You shouldn't anyway. If you have a landing zone that you're considering landing in, you should have walked it ahead of time, right? If you have a situation where you have a steep downhill to get into an upwind situation, it's like you should consider whether you should fly or not. Okay. Just think that when you're going downhill, the downhill is adding energy to the scenario, right?
If in doubt, land uphill.
Yeah, land uphill. Yeah. Generally, like the problem with landing, like say at a high density altitude site, if it's flat, is running out of feet. Basically, you're not gonna be able to run fast enough to land if you mess up your flare timing, right? Uphill, it's almost impossible. Like if you fall on your face, you'll go like half a foot, right? Assuming you don't get hurt, right? So land uphill is definitely the way to do it. So if you have an opportunity to practice uphill landings, definitely do that. Okay, you want to obtain a landowner's permission to use a launch or landing site before every flying day unless there's an established protocol. Yeah. All right, we'll talk a little bit about safety. All right, so the danger level and hang gliding depends on the individual's commitment to safety and risk management. It varies between individuals because of skills, abilities, environment, and equipment choices, right? You should repack your parachute every 6 months. And the parachute deployment sequence is to look at the handle, reach for the handle, pull the chute, look for an open, throw the chute, and pull back the bridle. Where do you find your glider's inspection recommendations? Nobody knows? Anybody work in tech? Does anybody know what I mean when I say RTFM? Read the frickin' manual. Yeah. So you can find the inspection requirements in the manual itself, typically. I know for Ikaro Moyas and Will's Wing gliders, they all have inspection stuff in the manual. Okay. Rules of the road. Okay. So ridge soaring on a head-on course, whoever has the ridge to the left is expected to turn towards the valley, right? So if I have a ridge, right, and the ridge is to the glider's left, right? Then if you're in a head-on situation, then the glider with the ridge to the left is expected to turn towards the valley, right? Those of us who live near coastal sites where you have a ridge site, the same rule applies. Whoever has the ridge to their left is expected to turn away. Okay. Turn towards the valley, towards the open space, not towards the ridge. You want to enter thermals going the same direction of whoever's in the thermal. So if you see somebody circling and you're going to join that thermal, join the same direction. Don't go the opposite direction. Clearing turns, make sure no one's in the area that you're going to fly before turning a direction. So not only do you want to look, but a typical habit that I've developed is I'll actually roll the glider slightly like this and look underneath the wing and then turn that direction. Right. Okay, overtaking. If you're passing between a glider being overtaken or passing between the glider being overtaken and the ridge is recommended because if he turns, he'll turn away from the ridge, but it can be dangerous because the pilot that you're passing can drift towards the ridge. So it can push you up against the ridge. Now this is the book answer. The real world answer is if you're going like this and you're on a ridge and you're catching up with somebody, okay? And there's not a lot of space between them and the ridge, turn around, go the other way. Check your 6, look behind you, go, okay, there's nobody behind me, and turn around, go the other way, right? Because when you're trying to pass somebody, especially if you're passing them on the ridge side, like sometimes if you know them, you might make it work. But if you don't know them, you don't know necessarily how they're going to react, right? So the other one is you're coming up from behind. You think about it, if you were in the leading glider and somebody all of a sudden passed you on the right, like what would your reaction be, right? That surprise, like that, the startle reaction, right? You don't know what their startle reaction is going to be, so just go the other way, get out of there.
Yeah, the other thing is don't assume that they can see you.
Right. Yeah, if you're coming up on their 6, they're probably not going to see you. Okay. All right, so we talked about overtaking. Airspace and sectional char is my favorite part. All right. So we have the many airspace types. So we have, let's start with the airport airspaces. Okay. Actually, we'll go from the ground up. Okay. So the first airspace that we have to deal with is class G. Okay. G equal ground. G equal close to the ground. Okay. So, and this is something you kind of have to memorize more than anything else. But in most places, unless it's marked otherwise, it's ground Class G airspace is from the ground to 1,200 feet, AGL, above ground level. Okay. So unless it's marked otherwise, it is Class G airspace is 0 to 1,200 feet AGL. Okay. Now, there is one case where it's from ground to 700 feet. Okay. Now, where is that? A good place to look is on the sectional chart. From here, let's do a good example here. All right, so let's look at Guston Airport here. So on a sectional chart, and here's the thing, on sectional charts, all of the chart symbology is actually on the chart itself. Okay, so I'll send you the link to SkyVector, which is the site that we're going to be using for the actual I'm actually showing you on the screen. Okay, and if you set it to the sectional chart mode, let's do that. Let's do world. We'll do the San Francisco chart. Okay, so if I zoom out of the San Francisco chart, you can see that all the symbols are in the corner here. Everybody see that? Okay, all right, cool. So we're gonna go back to World VFR, we'll go back to Guston Airport. Okay, so we got Guston Airport here. Now, according to the chart, a magenta circle is an untowered airport. Okay, so there's no other markings around it. So how high does Class G airspace extend to at Guston Airport?
Is that 1,200?
That's 1,200. Good. Okay. Now, immediately next door at Los Banos, you have this airport that has a magenta colored airport symbol, right? And it has this magenta vignette. Okay. Anybody have any idea what that means? How high does Class G airspace extend to in this case? Since I just told you there were two altitudes.
700.
700, very good, yes. So for technical purposes, this airport has what's called an instrument landing or a takeoff procedure. And so they push the Class G airspace down to 700 feet. Okay, now, why is this important? This is important because if you look into the Part 103 regs, how late or how early are you allowed to fly under Part 103?
30 minutes before sunrise, 30 minutes after sunset.
If
you have strobe lights
that's visible to
I don't know.
3 statute miles,
Okay.
and you're in Class G airspace.
Okay.
Okay, so at Guston Airport, you could theoretically fly 30 minutes before sunrise or 30 minutes after sunset if you have a beacon that's visible for 3 statute miles and you're less than 1,200 feet. Make sense? How about here at Las Vegas? That same rule. 700 feet. Make sense? Okay. That's Class G airspace for you guys. All right. Now, the next airspace to deal with is E, Class E airspace, right? Now, the easy way to remember E is everywhere. Okay, so Class E airspace is everywhere where everything else is not, including Class G airspace. Okay, so let's take the example of Guston Airport. So I have Guston Airport. The Class G airspace extends from 0 to what, Richard?
1,200.
Okay, what's above that?
Class E.
E, good.
Yeah.
Now, pop quiz. How high does E extend above Guston Airport? There's sort of a magic number that everybody always throws around. Have you ever heard 17,999? No?
No.
Okay. So Class E airspace goes from the top of G to 17,999. Okay. Now, once we we'll get through that. Okay, so E is everywhere, right? Now,
And
why
that's
is
still
it?
above ground level, not
It's actually
actual
MSL.
altitude.
It's MSL. It's median sea
Median.
level. Okay. So G is
Yeah, what-
AGL
Okay.
and E is MSL. Make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering like where those, which one you go by AGL and which one you don't.
Yeah. So this is airplane stuff. So you kind of have to, like I said, you just kind of have to memorize it. Okay. Right. So 17,999. Why is it that specific? What's at 18,000?
Is that C?
Is that where like the jet planes fly?
Right. A.
Yeah.
What we call A
Or
above.
A? Okay. Yeah.
Right. So once you hit 17,999, you hit A airspace, and that's called above, right? You use it above, and it goes from flight level 180 to flight level 600. Okay. Now, that's not that important for us in hang gliders, because to go into that airspace, you have to have an instrument flight plan, and you have to have an instrument rating. Do we have instrument flight plans and ratings in hang gliding? No, we don't. So without a block clearance, you're not allowed in Class A airspace. That's why 17,999 is a thing. So if you have somebody bragging about a high flight, they always say they went to 17,999, right? Because you're not allowed in 18,000. Make sense? All right. So we talked about A, E, and G. So what you have, little airports, right? So if I want to fly during the day, although you are allowed to fly at night, but like a day VFR, most towered airports. So you have this blue symbol in the middle, right? What did I tell you about a magenta symbol?
Class G?
Right? Does it have a control tower or not?
Yeah. Untowered.
No,
Right. It doesn't have a tower. How about blue? Does it have a tower?
no.
Yeah, it does. It has a tower. Okay. Now, this dotted blue line around it, what kind of airspace would that be? What would be the airspace designation?
Class D.
B? So
D.
B is
No,
big.
D as in Daniel.
D is in delta, like Delta.
Yeah.
Class D airspace. Right, that's right. So the little airport is Class D airspace. It's denoted by a blue airport symbol and a blue dashed line around it. Okay, so you're looking at one of my home airports of Reed Hillview Airport, right? Okay, so you think about a cylinder that's 5 miles in diameter that's centered over the airport, and it goes up to a certain altitude. How do you find out how high that altitude goes?
There's that line, looks like a number over a number.
You're talking about down here?
I don't know.
How about here? You see the number in the box?
What box? I'm not sure which one we're looking at.
Okay, so you have, can you read the symbology here that says Reed Hillview Airport RHV?
Yeah,
Okay, now above it, you have a number with a box on inside a box, right?
yeah, 20.
Yeah, 20. So how high does that altitude extend? That Class D airspace extend?
To 2,000.
That's very good, exactly. That's right. Okay, so just for giggles, let's go to my real home airport of Palo Alto. How high?
Same, 2,000.
Yep. How about where I trained to fly Cessna 172s?
Well, 1,500, but what's the dash?
So it's a minus, it's below 1,500. Now, why would it be below 1,500? It's 1,500 and below.
Because now you're getting into
Because it's within another.
Right. Now, it's sitting under another type of airspace, right? Okay, now we're segueing right into where we want to go. C, easy. The next airspace to worry about is C, Class Charlie airspace, right? Okay, now Class Charlie airspace, easy way to think about it is congested. Okay. So Richard, you live in the Bay Area. Give me an example of a Class C airport off the top of your head.
That be San Francisco International.
That would be
No,
a big airport.
Oh, that's big.
We have two of them in the
Would
Bay
that-
Area, and they're actually right in front of you on the map.
Is that Moffett? Is
Nope.
that one of them? No.
Nope.
Chattanooga Airport is a Class C.
Yeah, Chattanooga is Class B.
Mhm.
But how about Oakland? Oakland International is a Class C airport, right?
Oh wow, that's not a big one.
Nope.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, it is a big airport, but the airspace around it's Class C, right? Okay, now we talked about the bottom of the Delta airspace of Hayward International here, right? Or Hayward Executive is minus 15. So above that, there must be another type of airspace, right? Okay, now you have this where you have T and 15, and I just told you a Class C airspace is surrounded by a magenta ring, right? So you see this? This is all Class C, all right through here. Okay, now, okay, so you have a T, it means top to 1,500 feet, and then delta is below 1,500 feet, right? So the delta goes right up to the bottom of the Class C airspace, which meets at 1,500 feet, right? Now, most airspaces, most Class C airspaces go to 4,000 feet. So you see here, San Jose, it says 4,000 to the surface. So this ring of the Class C airspace at San Jose, how far does it go? Down, sorry. How far does it go down?
The ground,
The ground, exactly. And the top of the airspace is?
4,000.
Okay, good. Make sense? Now you see here, what's the top of the airspace here and the bottom of the airspace right at this location? Actually, it's like this edge right here.
I'm sorry, which one?
So right here in the middle here,
Uh-huh.
you have this number and this number over the top. So top and bottom, right? So the top of the airspace is what?
4,000,
4,000.
And the bottom is?
1,500.
Very good. Okay. So like if I'm in a small airplane and I'm at 1,200 feet, can I be in this area?
No.
Yes, you can.
Or 1,200.
Yeah, you're 1,200
Oh,
feet.
12. I thought it said 25. Sorry.
Yeah. If you're 1,200 feet, you can. Right.
Mhm.
Until you get to this dash line. This dash line is Moffat's Class Delta airspace. Make sense? Okay. All right. So we talked about Class Charlie. So Class Charlie lines are what? How do you know them on a map? What color are they?
Magenta,
Okay. And are they solid or are they dotted?
they're solid.
Okay. How about Class D airspace? Are they what color is the line that denotes a Class Delta airport?
Dotted blue.
Yeah, dash blue. Okay. All right. So we're going to get into big. So Richard, what's our big airport in our area?
San Francisco International.
Okay, good. What lines border San Francisco International on the sectional chart?
Solid blue.
Yep, solid blue. Okay. So Class B is solid blue lines. Okay.
With those dashes going in,
are you
that's
talking
part of
about?
it. The
dash?
circle.
Oh, so you're talking about the circle here?
Yeah, I was looking at
That's
that.
actually what's called a VOR compass rose. So that's actually
Oh, okay.
yeah. So that's actually a compass. So you see the line that this arrow is north. Okay. All right. And I realize that's confusing, but okay. Let's zoom in and we'll ignore the compass rose. See how the airport's surrounded by these light blue lines?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this light blue line, it's a circle that goes directly around the airport. How far down does the Class Bravo airspace extend?
To the surface.
Okay. And how about what's the top of it?
Looks like 10,000.
That's right. Exactly. Okay. Now you talk about our favorite flying site of Fort Funston, which is right here, right? how high can I fly at Fort Funston and not be in the Bravo airspace?
Oh, was that 3,000?
3,000. Very good.
Okay.
Exactly. Now, let's say, for instance, I fly south of Fort Funston. I go to Westlake. How high can I fly over Westlake?
1,600.
1,600.
Yeah.
Exactly. Does that make sense? So it's not that important for me because where she lives is not that congested, but where we live, this is very important. Oh, by the way, like, yeah, you might
But
be
is-
able to
is
get
that-
away with flying into Delta or Charlie with a slap on the wrist, but if, like, say for instance, I fly into Class Bravo in a hang glider and I get caught, they'll come after my real airplane license. You cannot
Oh,
be in
wow.
there, right? Because, well, let's just talk about a simple matter. Like, why don't you really want to be in Charlie airspace or Bravo airspace in a hang glider? What's the risk?
Well, you can take out a passenger plane.
Or he'll take you out, right?
Or, yeah.
Right. Now, let's
I
say
think
for
they're more.
instance,
Yeah.
there's no contact between you and the other aircraft. What's the other risk that goes along with it? Primarily to you.
Turbulence.
Yeah, caution, wake turbulence. Exactly. Make sense? Okay. We'll go back east to look out so that it's a little bit more relevant to what me is doing here. Let's go to Chattanooga. It's Columbia. Boy, I'm not as familiar with the East Coast. That's Charlotte. But you live near Charlotte, right?
I
Mia?
am in Charlotte. Yeah.
You're in Charlotte. Okay.
Mhm.
So what class airspace is Charlotte occupy?
Probably be Class B.
Right, exactly. Very good. Do you actually live in the town of Charlotte?
I do.
Okay. So on this map, where are you? Just a
geez.
general direction.
I'm probably a little southeast of the airport.
Okay. So you're like in this area? Can you see my
Yeah.
cursor?
Yep.
Okay. So you're in this area. So let's say for instance you're in your front yard. Would you be allowed to just pull up your hang glider and go fly?
No,
Okay. Why?
because the airspace is between ground level to 10,000.
That's exactly right. Exactly. And I think
And anywhere yellow is congested.
right.
So
Bingo,
we
exactly.
can't fly anywhere congested either.
Mhm.
Under Part 103. Now, congested
Right.
in the actual reg is not actually defined, right? So, like, what constitutes congested is not, like, that's a toss-up, right? But you wouldn't want to fly there primarily because there's just nowhere to land, right? Not many good places to land.
Mhm.
All right. Let's go ahead to where Lookat's at. So this is the South Carolina,
Yeah.
North Carolina,
Go-
South Carolina. So Tennessee is south, right? South.
Just go due west.
McGee Tyson, that's definitely Tennessee. Lovell Field, Chattanooga. So there's Chattanooga here. So there we go. That's
Yep.
probably Lookout right there. Okay, so Lookout. There's nothing around it, no vignettes. So there is a vignette here, right?
Mhm.
But directly over this H symbol, which is the hang glider symbol on the chart,
Oh, cool.
the class Golf airspace goes from what to what?
I'm sorry.
The class Golf, Class G airspace.
Up to 1,200.
Good. What's after 1200?
What do you mean? What's after it?
What airspace is above that?
Oh, Class E.
Good. And that goes from what to what?
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Except for Class G.
Right. So it's 1200 to 17,999.
Right.
Okay, cool. All right. Last little bit. There's a visibility difference that you have to worry about. Class G, easy way to remember it is everything in Class G is 1 mile visibility. So you just have to be able to see 1 mile ahead of you, right? And how far do you have to stay away from clouds? And it's clear of clouds. So you could be right up next to it and not, as long as you're not in it and you're not touching it, you're good. Okay. So class G is 1 mile clear of clouds. Okay. Now, why do we make a distinction between class G and class E airspace? And what's the major difference as far as we're concerned?
Is that the distance we have to maintain from clouds?
Yes, exactly. And the visibility. So what is the visibility requirement in class E airspace below 10,000 feet?
Is it 3? I'm
Yes,
forgetting.
very good.
Okay.
Exactly. All right. Now, do you remember what the cloud clearance is required?
Is it 500 below
Uh-huh.
and 1,000 above? And I forget what the side to side is. Is it a mile to the side?
Easy way, yeah. Have you ever heard of an airplane called a Cessna 152?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the easiest way to remember it. 3-152. So now that you've heard that, what's the horizontal distance requirement? So go through that again. So you have 1. What does 1 stand for? 1,000 above.
Okay, so 1,000 above, the 5 would be
500 feet
500
below,
below, and the 2 would be was it 2 miles to the side? Or is
2,000.
it 2,000 feet
2,000.
still? Okay.
2,000. So 3-152. Below 10,000 feet. Okay. Now, why do we make a distinction between below 10,000 feet and above 10,000 feet? There's an easy way to think about that. Above 10,000 feet, or below 10,000 feet, the speed limit for airplanes is 250 knots indicated. Okay. What's the speed limit above 10,000 feet? Mach 1, the speed of sound. Okay. Now, given that above 10,000 feet, what does my visibility have to expand to? It's 5 miles. Okay. So you think about it as 5-1-1-1. Okay. So now, Richard, you need 5 miles of visibility in class E airspace above 10,000 feet. What do you need for lateral separation?
1,000.
It was 2,000 below 10,000 feet.
Oh.
You're going
Oh,
less.
I was
mile?
going off your 111.
Right, exactly. 1 mile.
Oh, it's a mile now. Okay, that's why I was thinking miles. Okay.
Right. So if you're going faster, you need to see further. Make sense? Okay. Now,
Yeah.
what are the other two ones? It's 1,000 feet above and 1,000 feet below.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That's the easiest way to remember it. It's like below 10,000 feet, you're going slower. It can be less. When you're above 10,000 feet, you're going faster. It needs to be more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The lateral separation is what trips people up. It's usually 1,000. They don't understand that needs. You get 2,000 feet cloud separation below 10,000 feet, and above 10,000 feet, you need 1 mile because you need more time to be able to see the other airplane.
So many numbers.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, be glad you're not getting your private pilot's license. You have to spit this stuff out on the check ride. Right? Okay. I think we just kicked that ass pretty hard, so I think we're going to call that part of it.